So a lot of people have been asking me, what is rule of three? And to put it simply, it's this. Jokes aside, rule of three is this crazy combination of road, gravel, and single track. At some point during the race, you're always going to have the wrong bike, and you're guaranteed on the course to find a couple bits of adventure and definitely find some places where your tires are going to lose a ton of grip. Rule of three is this kind of quintessential gravel experience where it is very much not a race, and there are plenty of people who have shown up to have an amazing time. People in flannels and jorts taking tequila shots all the way down the race, all the way to people like me dressed fully in Lycra, aero helmet, aero kit, aero socks, aero bikes, everything optimized to the T. And I think what makes Rule 3 really special is that those two people share the course and we both have an incredible time racing it. But with that answer out of the way, let's jump into the 4th annual edition of the Rule of 3.
All right, it is morning of Rule of 3. The bike is ready. We are kitted out. Loosely pack, new kit, the whole 9 yards, ready to kick some ass on some single track, gravel, and road. We'll see how it goes. Catch you guys at the end. How's the fence?
Alright guys, and we are now on board the neutral-ish rollout for Rule of 3. I know I called this the gnarliest gravel race in the US, but there are going to be a couple of road sectors. They've added this road sector specifically actually because there were a lot of complaints in 2023 that too many people got to the single track altogether, and there were too many kind of skill levels that were intermixed at that point in the single track. And so Andy and the team have done a great job by adding this, I think it was roughly 5-mile neutral rollout. I'm always going to call it neutral-ish because this got a little spicy at the end, but this did a great job breaking up the group. Last year I think I spent over 20 minutes kind of standing still in the single track, and this really enabled us to almost never have to put a foot down the entire race. It was really, really awesome. One of the things I always say with these kind of gravel neutral rollouts is that, no offense to you gravel guys, but you guys just don't know how to ride in a Peloton. Every time I do these things, you can spot the roadies, you can spot the guys who have only ever ridden off-road, because how comfortable people are is just super obvious when you're riding 4 or 5 wide, how much space you're willing to give people. So this entire time, you're covering the brakes, you're making sure that someone isn't going to do something stupid. And of course, there's going to be a lot of time where the group is going to be speeding up into slamming on the brakes, into speeding up and slamming onto the brakes. And so that's just the nature of these gravel races. You just got to take it for what it is. Gravel racing is not Peloton racing, and that's probably for the best. But we're going to go ahead and jump ahead to show you some of that stupidity in action. And here we are heading up to one of the little rollers on this neutral rollout. This is one of the many rollers that kept this part of the neutral rollout pretty spicy. Watch this guy in red, overlaps wheels, almost takes out the guy in front of me. This was, I would say, one of like 30 occurrences of somebody who's riding 48mm bars, almost taking somebody out and crashing everybody. No offense to this guy, it happens. This was not just him. I'm not calling him out. There were tons of these occurrences, but as you can see, we're doing a ton of watts up this climb, and we're all about to start coasting as we go down. But I want to draw your attention to this guy in the green Aspero at my 1 o'clock. We're about to start going downhill, and you're going to see the speed really pick up. And you're going to watch a classic thing where people are not paying attention, and some really dangerous shit is about to happen. So you can see we're going almost 30 miles an hour, and at the very bottom is a small, not very dangerous right-hand turn, and we're all pulling the brakes. And all of a sudden, these two guys are in contact and launches him out into the grass. Now, you can't really see it from my GoPro footage, but the guy on the outside was 100% at fault. He shot by everybody else in the Peloton, was trying to make a sneaky move. There clearly wasn't room for him, and the guy on the Aspero did a great job keeping it up and preventing a much more dangerous crash from actually happening. I believe the guy kept it up in the grass, but This is, I mean, tons of things like this were happening throughout the entire race. But let's jump to where all of the separations really happened. And here we are, we're at the base of the first actual road climb throughout this. I've done a great job. I think at this point I'm maybe in the top 75 to 100 wheels, but honestly, counting people while in a peloton is extremely difficult. At this point, I've realized that I've probably gone out too hard. If you've been watching my wattages throughout this video, I've been well at or near threshold for a ton of this road. And, you know, when you're drafting, it's super important. But I've kind of told myself, hey, this road climb, I need to settle in. I need to find my group. And I'm not going to do that by doing a VO2 max effort, blowing myself up. There are still 45 miles left in this 50-mile race. If you really care, you've got to settle in. And so you can see that I'm letting tons of people pass me. And I've just got to make peace with that. You know, the draft advantage is really no longer there. And by sticking with this group, I'm only going to hurt myself. So I let that group go. At this point, you know, you can feel it mentally. You're like, oh my God, I'm losing so many spots. Look at all of these people who are passing me. You know, I feel like I'm throwing my race away as I'm making this move and letting them do that. But you can see I'm keeping it, you know, just slightly above threshold for me personally. My FTP is right at 302 watts, so I feel really comfortable doing this effort. And you can see, just like any other race, here it comes. Like, everyone just kind of stops pedaling as hard the moment the climb gets a little less steep. And you can see all of a sudden, you know, the peloton is no farther ahead of me than it would look like I was just going backwards. And all of a sudden, we're right there. Also, shout out to this guy. We rode together for a ton of this race. He is rocking the big brother to the equipment that I'm running. Those are 2.2 Conti Race Kings and 700C. As you can see on my tires, I've got the 650B 2.2s of those. Rocking that Lauf Segla to support those humongous tires. But gotta respect a Bonk Bros Savant. Gotta respect a guy who knows his tire choice. Honestly, for a mountain bike race, I can't think of a better tire than the 2.2 Conti Race Kings. They're just above and beyond the best tire you could possibly be using for this race. But enough about tires. As you can see, we're still going up this climb. I've stopped losing positions at least, but we're finally to the crest of this kind of major road climb. I've probably lost 20 or 30 positions, not overdoing the effort. But at this point, as we enter into the flat sections, I'm making a conscious effort. Okay, we're drafting now. We're focusing on doing as little work as possible. People in gravel races are never going to stop you from drafting. They're never going to play tactics with you. They're usually happy to just work for you. So you're going to see that continue to play out. But this is rule of 3. I've only shown you road. So I would say it's time for us to jump into the gravel sectors. All right, and welcome to Ozark Gravel. As we turn off of the pavement, see that giant hole on the right that this dude just rides over, and you're now on Ozark Gravel. As you can see, it's this really fun combination of what we call hard over, or loose over hard, which is this basically a bunch of loose pebbles and rocks, and sometimes bigger, like 2 to 3 inch rocks sitting over stuff. The other part of this that I love about the Ozarks, the beautiful kind of overhanging trees. You get a ton of this. Personally, it makes it like hell to see anything, even for the DJI Action 4, which is struggling to kind of keep it with the low light here. It makes it really hard to see, and as you can see, we're going over some big holes. Just launched a couple more bottles. You'll see some other holes that have launched a couple of other people's bottles. 2 things if you're going to ride in the Ozarks. 1, guys, get a bottle cage that can actually hold your bottles. I think I saw like 10, 15 bottles just get launched in this sector alone. There's another one going by. But the second thing is get wide tires. A lot of these guys are having to do bunny hops and other games just to avoid losing their bottles. But you get some 2.2 mountain bike tires on this sucker, you can just ride right over that. And so this is Ozarks Gravel. We're going to do a quick transition back onto the road for a second, but then immediately jump back in. Our Ozark Gravel is kind of what we call sawtooth gravel, so no real sustained climbs. You're really going to stick to just kind of VO2 max efforts overall. Lots of up, lots of down, very little flat. You're generally going to be pedaling in some way. And so your goal in any of these sections is to keep it rolling fast. Want to always stay on the pedals, even if all you're doing is 200 watts. I think that's a really important thing for you. You can see I've already passed a ton of people just doing some watts. A lot of folks will kind of freewheel or half pedal in these sections, and so you can get a lot of ground, as you can see, going 20 miles an hour doing 100 watts. You know, this is kind of ideal as you're going through. But this is a lot of what the terrain in Rule of 3 was like. These nice, open, wide, kind of 2-car lane roads. A lot of folks kind of pedaling half so, really trying to chase. But I think my goal here is to make up some of the places that I've lost. overall, and we'll get to it soon, but we'll see some of the more nasty kind of single track descents and turns that you get to do, just like right here where you're going a hard left and immediately into some loose shit as you take your left turn. But this is the gravel you're going to see throughout the entire course. But let's jump to the more exciting stuff. As I said before, it's rule of 3, so let's jump to the single track. All right, and welcome to Northwest Arkansas single track. We're doing a pretty gentle entry into this one, but welcome to our single track. As you can see, much like our gravel, it's a lot of loose shit over some hard, kind of chunky gravel. Lots of loose turns in gravel. One of the things that I like to say about rule of 3 is that you're never going to win this race in the single track, but you certainly can lose it about 90 different ways to Sunday. You can see here immediately within the first maybe 200 yards of us starting this race, dude has already fallen off with the course. Really what it comes down to is that this single track is going to, one, eat tires. The number of guys who have to DNF this race because they get sidewall slashes is just insane. There are so many big chunky rocks that jut out to the sides and can slash the sidewalls of your tires. They can be really punishing. But the second here is that the other way you can lose this is just by taking an unfortunate crash. This is a race where you really need to spend a lot of time practicing riding your gravel bike on single track. I know that sounds crazy, but if you're going to do a race like this is a really big deal. Take a little, almost have to put a foot down here. Guy is really excited behind me, shoots by me at the last second. You can kind of hear me here. I'm pretty excited that I managed to keep that up. One of the hard things here is that you're trying not to get passed by people, but you want to leave enough space to the person in front of you that you can actually follow and keep your momentum. The worst thing that you can do on this single track is have to stop and then regain your momentum. When you're really cranking at like 30, 40, 50 RPM, it can be really hard to take some of these more challenging features. You can see here I'm way too close to this guy in front of me, and what that means is that I have no ability to surge into some of these features, and if anything, it's actually steep. And you can see here I lose a ton of time just on a corner that really isn't that difficult, but because I couldn't keep my momentum, that hill feels a lot more challenging. The other thing about this, I know I've said it twice on this video before, but wide tires make this course so much easier. I did this course last year on essentially the same bike with a few modifications. The big one is that I went from 650B 50mm tires to 2.2 mountain bike tires. That's only around 8 mil of difference between the 50 and the 58 that I'm effectively running here, but the truth is that matters so much. The extra grip that you're getting and the extra low PSIs you're able to run. For this race specifically, I'm running 19 PSI in the front and 21 PSI in the rear. That is insanely low for gravel tires, and really exactly what you should be running, and it's allowing me to kind of roll over some of the shit that my other competitors are much better at handling. And I am by no means a skilled gravel bike handler. I come from the road. I'm pretty decent at turning in one direction in a crit over and over, but doing this on a mountain bike, I've only started mountain biking in the past 8 months. This is definitely still a weak point of mine. And I think the reason that I'm able to keep up with these guys and even remake contact with this group is that I've got the right equipment for this race and I'm able to keep going. You get a lot of these fun sections. You can see a lot of big chunky stuff. Easy to lose traction unless you've got the right equipment here. I think the other thing, you see a ton of people in this race rocking 52 tooth and 50 tooth rear cassettes. A lot of mountain bike derailleurs that are in this race. You need a ton of gearing range. On this bike, I've got a 42 up front and a 1042 or a 1044 from SRAM, which is their Explore lineup, and that's just enough for me. But if you're going to get a little more tired during the race and you want to go a little easier on those climbs, you're really going to need something like a 1050 for the race. But I think at minimum, you're going to need like a little bit less than a 1-to-1 gear ratio like I'm rocking here with that 42-44 at the back end, because there is just so much climbing that happens during this race and a lot of low gear, low cadence work that you're having to do up some of these steep, pitchy switchbacks that you're going through. As you can see, none of the actual single track we have here is that technical, but as you can see with the wattage, you get 0 time to actually recover. If you're descending, you are getting rocked around on the bike and you're constantly worried about making sure that you can make the next turn and you're not going to screw anything up. And every time you hit one of these like slight 8% pitches, you're doing 300 watts or more depending on how much you weigh. But each one of these sections is just so critically important that you keep with your group, because every time you get past, you're never going to get to pass somebody again. I think as an entire race, I didn't pass a single person on the single track. I had to do all of my time making up outside of the single track, unless you count the folks who have flatted on the sides. And that's another great point to talk about during these races. During Rule of 3, I think I passed over 20, maybe 25 people who had flatted. One, having the right kit so that you don't flat is crucial, but two, being ready to rip a dyno plug, being able to rip whatever kind of plug system you're rocking for your tubeless sires immediately and really quickly can save your race. I had a lot of folks who talked to me after the race and were saying, you know, I lost my PSI, and all of a sudden I lost my rear tire and I couldn't reseat the bead, and that was race over for me. And there were plenty of folks who were really experienced at plugging those tires and did it in less than 3 seconds, hopped off the bike, grabbed their dart, and were done. And those were the kind of folks who were able to recover from certain things like that. And as we wind down this first single track sector, as we approach this next road section, let's talk about some of the numbers for this race and how hard this race truly was. Because like I said, these single track sectors give you absolutely no rest. It's a tempo effort, if not VO2 max or more, most of the time that you're pedaling here. But let's take a look first at this very first section of road and that big climb that I was talking about before. Alright, and this is that first road section that I was talking about. As you can see, about 26 minutes. Overall, it actually was around 8.7 miles, so a little longer than 5 miles I initially told you guys. Required a normalized power of 263 watts. For me, at 302 watts FTP, that's 87% of my FTP for that first part of the race. Like I said, an extremely challenging part of the race, and whenever you're drafting, that is just so important. And so I think the guys at FastCat said it best: when you're doing a gravel race, it's hard out all the way at the beginning, and then it's survival after that. And you can see that played out here with this first road section. And of course, it wouldn't be Rule of 3. There were some jokes this year that we should have called it Rule of 4, including B roads is one of those things. As you can see here, really awkward, loose, off-camber kind of turn here onto a B road. I think perhaps this is, even outside of the single track, this is the most dangerous section of the course that we ever enter. There are about 3 or 4 of these throughout the whole race, but these completely unmaintenanced, extremely loose, covered in leaves, fast descents. You can see that everyone is riding their brakes. This really was kind of the X factor in this race, and actually for me was super uncomfortable. Like I said, I'm not a great bike handler. You can hear it. I lock up both front wheel and rear wheel. It feels like managed to keep things going, but sections like these are ones where if you're not head on a swivel paying attention during every section of this ride, you can easily send yourself over the bars and do something really dangerous. And so grateful they had some caution signs out there, but sections like these really keep you on your toes. They connected us to some amazing sections of single track, but as you can see, here are some of the teams that are starting to pass me. Guys who are a little faster are going to do some great team racing, but this is really what Rule of 3 is about, is kind of pushing beyond your boundaries, and I really felt that today, as even I was challenged. I thought I had prepped a ton for this course, but really still got my butt kicked. And speaking of getting my butt kicked, how could I forget perhaps the seminal feature of Rule of 3 this year was the pump track section. We happened to need to go through Blowing Springs, and Andy said, well, you know what, we're running / riding by it, why don't we just send the riders onto the pump track? So here you go. Here is the single lap of the pump track that we got to do. Fun fact, the last time that I rode this pump track, I rode it the opposite direction, which I did not realize was the wrong direction, and absolutely ate shit going down what is supposed to be a jump and treating it like a drop. But pump tracks are a ton of fun on a gravel bike. If you've never done this before, you can hear people hewing in the background. It's a ton of fun. Definitely rode this a little more cautious than usual, but really enjoyed this little section. It was such a fun little reprieve before going into like a pretty long, hard pavement section. You can catch me. I almost eat shit going off of this wooden bridge. Was definitely scared for the next one. Was trying not to embarrass myself in front of the supporters. But little moments like these are what make Rule of 3 Rule of 3. And why I love this event so much. But without further ado, finishing the pump track section, let's jump into some of the final stats for my Rule of 3 race overall. So for the entire race, you can see that I finished in 3 hours and 29 minutes and 56 seconds. Officially, this was 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but I'm not going to fight them over the extra 4 seconds they gave me. Distance was 52 miles, always getting a little bit extra from Andy and the team. TSS of 227 during the ride. 2,600 calories burned, normalized power of 243 watts. For me, that's an IF of 81%. Pretty decent for a 3.5 hour effort. I think that certainly could be improved. But a variability index of 1.21, that's obviously quite high, but for a spiky gravel race like this, that's not to be unexpected given the amount of single track. But I think the craziest part is that we've managed to climb or cram in over 3,600 feet of climbing in just under 52 miles. That's a ton of climbing and a ton of fun, and probably felt a lot worse than it actually was on course. Overall, this was an incredibly fun and challenging event, and as you can see me even in the background skipping over some loose single track, catching some folks, but I think the beauty of this event was just the ton of fun that I had and all of the preparation that went into it. Speaking of preparation, let's talk about nutrition. I was dialed for nutrition when it came to this race, did a full day carbo load. I did the final math on it. I ate over 2,300 calories of just rice alone the day before this race actually, and amplified that with some honey, some syrup, some cereal, and some Sour Patch Kids, which were super delicious, and by the end of it I was so sick of eating them, but the carbo load worked perfectly. I have never felt better on race day. This was really challenging, but I think without it I would have been absolutely screwed. I had 2 incredibly high carb bottles, and as well as an Usui pack with carbs. Within my bottles were 700 calories worth of carbs each within them, so that's 1,400 calories in the bottles, and I had an additional 700 calories within the Usui pack itself, so 2,100 calories in liquid hydration. Given that this is a mountain bike style race for a lot of it, you really can't rely on eating gels, be able to take your hand off the bar to be able to go open a gel or eat a solid food. So hydration is just incredibly important for getting in those calories, and was one of the basically like requirements to be able to actually complete this race. I didn't finish my Usui pack. I finished a little faster than I actually expected, and so managed to not have to drink the whole thing, but felt like my nutrition was perfectly dialed for the race effort, and would highly recommend. I used Scratch Super Fuel, so that's that hyper concentrated stuff. It's way easier to digest than some of the other stuff that's in the market. I find it a lot less sweet and makes it a lot more palatable over the 52 miles. But this ends my rule of 3 and my recap of the video. I think it's probably perhaps the gnarliest race in the US in terms of the amount of single track and the difficulty of the single track, but feel free to leave a comment in the video below. Let me know what you think is more gnarly. Is it BWR California? Is it one of those races that's outside of the South that I've never been to that I need to head to? Let me know below so that you can voice your opinion. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and have a great day. Bye.